Welcome to Tom Rhodes Smart Camp, and welcome Julie Seabaugh to to the Rhodes Library.
Books, check them out. I've.
We love knowledge. We love knowledge.
Reading is dead. Reading is dead. I've been here a time or two, and I always like to take a moment to check out all your books and remember how libraries used to be a thing, and it's all very nostalgic and
Reading, thing of the past.
Yeah, let's talk on a podcast now instead.
I love having people over who appreciate the books and we'll even look at them. Mm-hmm. There was after I got divorced, there was a woman I met that came to visit me, and she was here for a weekend.
In the biblical sense.
And she never mentioned the books once. Never. I never saw her looking at them, and she never asked me, which is your favorite book?
Yeah.
How did you? Where did they all come from?
So you like to read, do you?
Yeah. So I thought that really. And then she didn't like my vinyl record. She kind of put it down. She listens to music on the streaming service, and she doesn't have to flip the record every 3 songs.
Right. Probably. So a younger lady, maybe. What did she think
she was
about
in her 40s.
Oh.
Yeah.
What about the roller skates?
Yeah. Well, she never progressed that far in my life to find out the other annoying details of someone who's trying to improve their life.
Yeah, but you definitely have a collection of you've been around the world, you've met people, you're proud of what you've done, and it shows, and it's fascinating to kind of fill in all the little details.
I'm a collector. I like to see my apartment looks like a National Geographic gift shop,
Or hoarders, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, oh my God, I can't remember his name. Judd Apatow, when he came here, he goes, "It's not hoarding if all your stuff is cool."
I guess you can always it's always good for money at some point too. There's always that.
If I had to sell?
Yeah.
Oh, geez.
It's an investment in this current day and age of.
Yeah. How much will my plastic knickknacks? I like to call this my empire of $20 purchases, because everything I have basically costs a book is about $20, a record's about $20. So that's my empire of $20 purchases.
Unless you gotta burn it for fuel or politics or whatever,
Yeah. I'm gonna be the last library.
I'm actually kind of thinking this might be almost a story, possibly.
What do you mean?
Do comedians read? Is literature dead in comedy? Is there a point in all these memoirs that are coming out? Because there are a lot of memoirs coming out. Maria Bamford, Gary Goldman, Aparna. I'm doing one with Byron Bowers that's coming out in the spring. Just shoehorn that on in there.
Yeah, no.
But it's what's the point?
I want to talk about all these things about you because for people who don't know you, I think you're, in my opinion, the current and legendary comedy writer. Yeah, I want to say preeminent. Is that
preeminent's a word?
Yeah.
I mean, there's certainly a couple with, I would say, higher profiles, but I feel like I get down there in the gutter and dig around in my own unique way.
So how did you fall in love with comedy? Do you remember your first tinglings of the moment and the comedian that made you fall in love with this?
I do. I've maybe told this a place or two elsewhere, but growing up in Missouri, there wasn't...
Where in Missouri?
About 2 hours south of St. Louis. There's a city called Cape Girardeau.
That's it. I've been there.
Where Rush Limbaugh's from.
Okay.
And
there's a statue.
Probably is by now. I wouldn't be surprised. But I grew up on a farm outside of that city. And legit farm, corn, soybeans, fishing ponds. There was some rabbits. There's donkeys now. And no cable. And I didn't really know what comedy was until I went off to college. University of Missouri was where I was studying journalism when Dave Attell came to town.
And you saw Attell
My senior
at
year.
University of Missouri. Wow.
Yes. He was doing the Jesse Auditorium, and I was writing for the Vox magazine Alt Weekly at the time, and doing more like film, music stuff, and had discovered Comedy Central through having cable finally at Mizzou. And so Insomniac was on, and I was like, I can interview this guy beforehand, like a journalist in Q&A. And then we saw the show. All the student journalists got to go backstage afterwards. And there was, a little bar across the street that we all frequented, and took him over there. And this was the height of Insomniac, so everyone is sending Jaeger shots from all over the bar, and they're like
Wow.
piling up on the table, and he's Attell and getting us all drunk on Jaeger shots. And the next morning, I woke up on my friend Dan's bathroom floor, very sick, and I was
Dave
like,
Attell put you on the ground.
wouldn't be the first time he got me drunk, but certainly memorable. And I was like, I think there might be something to this comedy thing. Like, why haven't I read about it? Because it's like an art form, but it's kind of got this more interesting side than music.
Like, why? In what way?
And it took me a while to kind of formulate these theories, obviously, but it's a person in their brain just standing there, just talking, sharing their viewpoint. There's minimal machinery. I mean, we could talk about the industry changes, obviously, but if you're funny and you're able to get on stage and kind of hone that craft, you can theoretically control that career. And that's pretty fascinating to me. Also, as someone who's tried to be like a freelance journalist, I connect with the sort of rebel aspect to it, I
The
guess.
do-it-yourself
Yeah.
loner.
And the darkness and the depression and trying to make sense of things and laughing at tragedy. It's been 20 years of covering it, and it's like, oh, I very much understand why I was drawn in here. It makes a lot of sense.
Well, it's beautiful. Attell was your first
Attell was my
comedy
first.
love. I ranked Dave Attell with my top 3 favorite
Oh, he's the
comedians of all
best.
time.
He's the best.
And Insomniac, what a great show.
Oh, it was so
When he
him.
came to Amsterdam and put me on.
That's
the
true.
episode,
That's
that was-
correct. Was that what, season 3 or 4?
It was such a genius concept because he went to Amsterdam to experience the 7 deadly sins. Mm-hmm. And I was envy because I had a talk show.
Wow, you remember that better than me, and partially that's because
I was in it.
they. Well, also like those aren't available.
Yeah.
You can't. I have.
Why not? Why doesn't Comedy Central put that on YouTube?
I
or
could
something?
ask a lot of why didn't Comedy Central do things that Comedy Central hasn't done, and we'd be here all day. But I have the
Viva
two.
Vietnam isn't available anywhere either.
Oh God, yeah. There's some Strangers with Candy, yeah. But they did a 2-series best of DVD set of Insomniac. So some of the episodes are on DVD. Where you can play it, I don't know. Which ones are on it? They're in a box.
I still have a DVD player.
Should we bust it out next time?
I'll keep an eye out in the flea markets for that Insomniac.
We'll read books and watch best of Insomniac DVD. And
Yeah, when everyone else
are you on the best of?
I don't know. I hope so. What was better than Amsterdam?
Where else did he went? God, I don't even remember. But then he quit and he got sober because alcohol was killing him. And we could just have like a Dave Attell specific episode.
And now this book is about this book is about to come out. Or
It is available now on Amazon. It is called A Tight 20, 2 Decades in Comedy Journalism,
a tight 20. I like it.
which is a comedy reference to having enough for basically a middle set to,
Yeah.
a tight 20.
And the first chapter is Dave Attell. So that's the interview you did with it? Or it's from the LA Weekly or Las Vegas Weekly?
So I met him and he performed in the fall of 2002 in Columbia, Missouri, because I was taking an extra semester there and trying to save some money to immediately move to New York. And that would have been in February of 2003, once I had moved to New York and had started writing professionally. So I count January 2003 as me being a professional journalist, and that Apatow interview took place for Las Vegas Weekly, who I was connected with through a professor at Mizzou. Knew an editor there. So it was, the Mizzou Mafia connections is what they call the journalism school,
Nice.
Spread all over the world. They have ethics, all that stuff. Best in the country. I don't know if I believe it anymore, but at the time.
So what stands out in your mind about that Apatow interview?
So I had kind of already met him and I figured I could do it, and I started really understanding like the minds of comedians at that point. Obviously,
Well, that's funny because he has such a unique mind,
But he's
like
kind of the best of the best, though, too.
Not every comedian's a genius like David Apatow.
But if you kind of use him as maybe a, let's say, the top of the top, best of the best, how funny everyone could potentially possibly be, and how people create jokes and how they write the way they write and work their perspective into it. And he was just always like a mile a minute, trying out stuff every single night, never happy with any of it. Like, there's a perfectionist side of him to kind of juxtapose with the darkness that I found really fascinating and have still, this whole entire time. He did my 40th birthday roast at the Comedy Store up in the Belly Room. He was in town with Jeff. And so he came on and roasted me a little. And it was just this amazing full circle, like, I think I've been on the right path. So I always...
That's really beautiful.
Yeah, I think very highly of him. A lot of people do. I feel like he needs more credit. His next special, he mentioned, was going to come out on YouTube, so stuff like that is weird.
I think that he's not enough people know who he is, but he still plays to sell out crowds wherever he goes.
Yeah, he's still.
I'm starting to think I wish more people knew about me, so I could sell some tickets.
When does this come out? Like Wednesday at Townhouse in Santa Monica, Venice.
I love David Attell's
Yeah.
a genius. What's your favorite Attell joke? I love the look in children's eyes when you let him out of the trunk. All these classics.
Man, there was a point when I could quote huge chunks of Skanks for the Memories, and everything from love to travel. I think it's because my dad used to beat me with a globe. To that one chunk he had about that started from, I can't remember where it starts. You know that look when you look in a woman's eyes in the morning, and her one good eye, and you help her strap on her leg, and then put her parrot back on, and you fucked a pirate. What? It's just from these small, just dark twists to this. He has a very also subtle absurdist side to him.
Yeah.
And just every crowd interaction where they're ridiculous and cutting and insightful, but also very caring. He's a very caring guy.
Yeah.
That I don't know if a lot of people realize. And I mean, that's just, there's a certain, I think, sensitive side to comedians that helps with you got to have it if you're going to put your work out in the way that comedians do, just to be able to tap it in the first place. But I think he kind of has it a lot more than most. And yeah, I could talk about Attell all day.
Yeah, I love it too.
I could
And
really
he's
just
been
go
really
on.
good to me in his career.
And
you
other
know.
people.
He's put me on that, and then the other stand-up show he had on Comedy Central.
Oh, the Underground, yeah.
Yeah, that was great. So
Yes.
he's always been good to me. And me, him, and when I lived in New York, 98 to 2000, before I moved to Amsterdam, and Attell he would do his sets, but he would always slip out. He wouldn't let people go drink with him.
Mm.
And he would take me because he had this little round of like really late night dive bars he would go to. And he would take me and Hedberg. So me and Hedberg going around with Attell. A lot of times it was just me and Attell, but then there was a few times where it was the three of us. And it was, really self-destruction in the funnest possible way.
Didn't he, maybe this was you or somebody else, or somebody said like when Attell really would go to a bar for himself, it was like police bars or fireman bars or something like that?
Yeah.
Was it? Yeah, like a real blue collar.
I don't remember. There was a place called Siberia he would take me to, which was like,
I knew that place.
it was like 52nd Street or something. Like you went down the subway entrance and it was like
red lighting.
It was this tiny little place, and
Yeah.
The bartender would sell you cocaine, and it was really, really tiny.
They sometimes had comedy in the basement.
Oh, well.
There was a Conan O'Brien impersonator who I met at some event or something, who I remember ran shows down there.
Wow.
And I would see some of those. I ended up there on the anniversary of the blackout, I remember, in New York, seeing comedy down there, being extremely drunk. But yeah, I knew Siberia, all those like broken chairs, and
Yeah.
there was something about men weren't allowed to talk to women. Women had to approach men first. Was that a thing?
No, I mean, it was a tiny place. I don't remember a basement even. It was just like a bar, and there was like this much space between the wall and the bar. It was just like, it was tiny. And
Didn't it move? Maybe
drinking
it moved
straight
at some
vodka
point.
and doing cocaine. I'm surprised I wasn't more skinny at that period.
I think it might have moved at some point too.
Okay.
Also, after that, yeah, because I would have been there. You said you left 2002.
2000.
I would have been there in like 3 and 4 and 5.
Yeah. I love that Attell was your, your introduction into the biz of writing about comedy. Sarah Tiano, she like hosted a radio show at Georgia Tech, and she interviewed me. And she was like this eager young college student who loved comedy. And so like, it always flashes in my mind because she's really had a great career. She's a great writer, great comedian, beautiful human being. And whenever I see her, I feel like this kind of pride, like almost like we're related. Because
Yeah. She's like your comedy daughter.
Because I just remember how like earnest she was,
Yeah.
and
I don't think Attell feels that way about me.
No.
I think it's more like, you again.
And then you and I, my first memories of us becoming friends was, and I don't know how it happened, but our mutual love of Mitch Hedberg, and you asking me about my relationship with Mitch.
Yeah, how would we have connected? I would have known who you were because you're a comedian, and not so long ago, it was possible to know who every single comedian was. You might have done some shows in Vegas, and I wrote about you, or something like that. Stayed in touch, and
Were you living in Vegas and writing about comedy there?
I did, so that's when I left New York in 2005.
Would you like more coffee?
Okay.
You have to keep talking while I get it.
Okay. Is this all on it?
Yeah, no. Yeah, this is all in. So please,
Well,
continue.
so I was living in Vegas on staff at Las Vegas Weekly, which was my one adult journalism job I've ever had before the first 2007, 2008 what do you call it? Not pandemic,
Financial crisis.
financial crisis, which killed journalism pretty effectively. Yeah, so I'm going to say that I was knowing about you already in Vegas, and I had met Lynn through Doug Stanhope's Death Valley Desert Party.
Okay. Jesus, maybe it was. Did
And
I meet you?
Provenza.
Did I meet you at Panamint for Doug Stanhope's?
2007?
I think that was it, and I went with Paul Provenza.
Okay, so that's when
Yeah.
you would have met then.
Wait,
So
this-
it was Vegas, but it was...
It was that desert party.
And no one remembers those a lot, so it's kind of... It stands to reason that we wouldn't really remember. I think Craig Campbell was there.
Yeah.
Matt Kirshen.
Yeah.
Definitely Henry Phillips. Brendan. That's when I met the Bretchels.
Who are the Bretchels?
Brett Erickson, Carrie Mitchell.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Hennigan, of course. Andy Andrist. And damn it, what's his name? He's in Kansas City now.
The
No
Kansas
one
City
likes
guy.
his.
Yeah, I can't
likes,
think of his
what's his name? Fuck. Sorry.
That's okay. So, what was your relationship with Hedberg? You interviewed him, and because you've been working on a documentary about Mitch Hedberg for years, and that's a beautiful thing. I hope it gets seen one day because you've put a lot of effort into it, and you interviewed me right here for that very film. So, and there's a Hedberg interview in the book that you're putting out. So,
I would probably put Hedberg as my all-time number 2 after Attell in terms of blowing my mind as a comedian.
yeah,
Because I did, once I discovered stand-up, he was right there immediately, and just, what is this guy? What is he doing? What is he talking about? What is the hair and the glasses and the cadence and the Bigfoot is blurry jokes. It just completely blew my mind open and was yet another step of kind of understanding like the artistry that can be evolved here.
you got two of the greatest comedian joke writers of all time,
Ruined me early on.
right out of the gate.
Yeah. So I had...
They're all going to be this great.
It's been a downhill 20 years. No. I wrote about him twice, so interviewed him twice. And the interview that is in the book is like the straight Q&A, not edited, not published, full thing. So kind of a rarity a little bit. And I do remember it gets pretty emotional and talks about his parents and Lynn and how he doesn't do drugs anymore. And
Oh, wow.
yeah, so he was someone I was always...
Why did he get emotional talking about his parents? Like, was it regret over
kind of
drugs or
rocky, yeah. I mean, they were always, as you know, as a closer friend of him, I only sort of knew him professionally from a few interviews and a couple shows. JFL, or when he opened for Mike Birbiglia's Stand Up New York album release, what was the Dog Years? Yeah, or the tours, the Comedy Central Live. Yeah, but he and his parents were not necessarily always on the same wavelength. To be fair, he maybe wasn't on the same wavelength as the rest of humanity in general.
Yeah.
But yeah, towards the end, I guess they didn't really talk much, and he wasn't honest with them about a lot of things, and they were begging him to take steps that he didn't want to take.
To get cleaned up. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, he's just somebody who I think affected a lot of people in comedy, out of comedy. His material is still universal, still timeless. you could still, it's still
every
brilliant.
generation discovers Hedberg and falls in love with him. It's amazing how, people quote it. I hear people all the time quoting his stuff, and I'll be like, oh my God, that person's got to be 18 years old, or that person's like early 20s, and it never seems to stop.
And you've seen people like all over the world.
Yeah, but
like his
talking
jokes.
about Hedberg.
Yeah.
Like old people, young people, everybody loves Hedberg.
Yeah,
all over the planet.
There's never been, a definitive project on his life through various reasons. But myself and director Jeff Siegel have taken it upon ourselves to change that. We have a couple strategic partners that we're paired up with. Business-wise, I can't say too much about it. Financially, that kind of thing. But basically, his entire family's on board. A lot of friends. The amount of people that are not on board is extremely small and limited to 2. But everyone else is supportive, and it's going to be something that happens one way or another, and live up to, what he's worthy of in a lot of ways.
And if you did this audio documentary on Hedberg that aired on Sirius XM, and you had me on there, and then you're making the film, and I didn't really realize it or think about it until after I had heard the audio documentary, but because I didn't realize he wasn't that close with that many people, and this period of like 1997 to 2000 when I moved to Amsterdam, he and I were like best friends, and we were just always hanging out and partying very hard together, and then once I told you the story about when he knew that I didn't like needles, and I told him I never had any desire to do heroin. Yeah, and he comes at me like in New York, it might have been at the Comedy Cellar. He goes, "I got a surprise for you," and we went back to his apartment, and he had powdered heroin instead of to sniff it. Because he knew I didn't like needles. How thoughtful that he had done that for me. And I didn't want to do it. And I, tried to, talk him out of it or whatever. But I stayed with him all. I didn't try and talk him out of it. I stayed with him all night. It was later when he started regularly using, and it was clearly affecting him, that I told him every book I ever read about anyone who did heroin, it either took them 10 years to kick it or it killed them, But
George
before, he got into that, there was a beautiful period where, we were, I'd say, best friends. And it was, and I think that was like from listening to your documentary, the audio documentary, that like, I think that period was like those were his like the golden period of his comedy. And my best memory with Mitch, because then he moved into the Chelsea Hotel, and I was living at 71 Broadway in the Wall Street area, and like we would be up all night after the sets would finish late, and then we'd be up until sunrise, and either he would have to walk back to the Chelsea from my place, or I would have to walk from the Chelsea back to 71 Broadway. And my best memories, though, even though we were hitting it so hard, were when we would pull out our comedy notebooks and share jokes that we were working on.
Oh, yeah.
Like, what do you think of this? What do you think of this? And I've said it a ton of times. The thing that blows me away about Hedberg was, I found cocaine to be the least productive, creative drug I've ever done, like for ideas and stuff. And Hedberg just seemed to it just be always bubbling over with new material, even when he was doing coke. And I'd be like, Mitch, when did you have time to write a joke about, cinnamon incense sticks? When we were like doing coke with these guys at your apartment,
But It was probably when he busted out the cinnamon. Yeah, the cinnamon.
But to write a
with
joke,
the Coke. Yeah.
to write jokes with so much innocence.
Yeah.
When we were doing Led Zeppelin level partying together, it was something.
I remember you saying like you would climb on statues and.
Yeah, there was this comedian out of Baltimore named Neil Graham. I hope he's still alive, and he was an acid freak. And I never liked acid, never did it. And I worked with this guy a bunch of times, and he told me. This was in that period I was living in New York. He goes, I know you don't like acid, but I've got some pure LSD on sugar cubes. And you just drop it into a tea, put it in tea and drink it, and then you'll be off to the races. And so the guy gave me 20 or 30 of them. And so I had rollerblades. I would rollerblade around the Wall Street area because it was total ghost town back then. And then after 4 or 5 solo missions, I invited. I told Mitch what I had. I guess with the same enthusiasm, he later came to me with the. We were like astronauts, just going on these missions together. That's what it felt like.
Exploring.
And so we did the pure LSD on the sugar cubes, and then in the Wall Street area, it's the Native American Museum. It was originally the customs house.
Yeah, down there.
There's these fantastic statues in front of it. And so I remember climbing on those statues with Hedberg and just sitting in the woman's lap and things like that. We had a ball.
Nature spirit.
We were walking out of Battery Park and looking at the water.
That really was we're referring to it as the sweet spot of
his life.
Yeah, it kind of all changed in '99 with the more increased drug stuff and kind of pulling away from friends.
Yeah.
So it wasn't just you, it was, everyone's kind of got those stories about it.
And I didn't realize that until you had made the audio documentary.
Yeah.
Well, and I told you the story when I met his parents after he died. And I told his mom, I said, I have to admit, I was kind of mad at him the last couple of years he was alive because I felt like he was blowing me off. And she said, I have to tell you, that's exactly how I felt. Mm-hmm. So, and
there's a lot of people.
A lot of people had that same feeling.
Yeah, but the '97, he was still, he on that upswing of people are catching on and thinking he's great, and he always thought he was going to be famous to some degree.
Yeah.
The rock star of comedy kind of thing that he always perfectly envisioned. And it was all happening and about to happen. And then he got the big JFL deal of $500,000 and the Fox deal, and that's kind of the difference of, if you were putting it into, say, documentary form, part 1 and part 2 of, his career took off, but personally,
Well, he had too much of I want to be a rock star, I think, because I think he did romanticize that thing about drugs to a degree where guitar players like Keith Richards, somehow heroin made them more electrifying or something, I don't know. I think there was
Jim Morrison was the idol.
Yeah.
He wanted to be the Jim Morrison of comedy. Yeah. But he also had, before the internet, it was harder to kind of string these things together. But, doing different morning radio interviews or different newspaper interviews for, coming into town for the weekend at comedy clubs, he would sort of be like, well, I'm not going to be around in a couple of years from now, so take me while you can. There's a certain argument to be made that he kind of knew what he was doing.
Yeah.
And had that fantasy.
Yeah. Because he had his gas firmly pushing down on the accelerator. Yeah.
So to that extent, he achieved it. Either way, he was
Well, what do you think
completely
makes
unique.
him? What's the enduring thing about Hedberg? You think just the innocence and hilarity of the jokes?
A lot of simplicity. He was very much a writer. He
I think about his jokes all the time.
Yeah.
Like when someone is trying to hand you a flyer.
when the
Here,
escalator breaks,
you throw that away. When an escalator breaks, yeah, everything.
you go to the store and there's like Pringles and bananas and like you can't like everything.
Yeah.
Rice. When you're hungry and you want 2,000 of something. It was just he winnowed
Mitch.
it.
We love you, Mitch. If you're listening to podcasts in the afterlife. And what about you interviewed George Carlin? And that interview is in the book too.
Yeah, that was another one. So I guess he passed in 2008? Is that correct, I think?
I don't remember.
That was also in Vegas. He had been coming to play Gosh, if I would have looked at it again before. He had been coming to play the bigger casino on the Strip that no longer wanted him because he was becoming problematic and getting canceled back in like 2005 and 6 for being George Carlin.
Yeah.
So he was switching.
Telling the Vegas audiences the shit that he was saying. Wow.
So he was like switching to the Orleans.
Okay.
And so that was kind of a bit of a shakeup. And I interviewed him for that. And he was pretty honest.
What'd he
was
say?
Talking about how all the business people didn't know what they were doing. And he wants to be honest. And, he's not actually... I think this actually might have gotten...
Syndicated?
There was, so in the Carlin doc that was recently made, that Kelly, was in and worked on and all
Great
that,
documentary.
she actually, I think, used a little bit of that audio where he was talking about, to me, he's not an angry person and he's not a depressed person. He's just a person who's disappointed in the world.
Yeah.
And this is how he deals with it. And this is, again, the same thing with, this is what art is. These are my experiences. I'm telling you what I think about things, and hopefully, you'll laugh in the process. And it was just this really interesting little paragraph of, I'm not a mad guy. That, something about that struck. But, I thought it was really open and honest, and I'm definitely glad I kept that one, for sure. That's probably maybe even more than the Mitch, like my little micro cassette.
Oh, wow.
Still, yeah.
You still have it. Nice.
They digitized it for the film and gave me a digital version back, but I still have the little green with George Carlin written on it and
Wow.
ink pen and probably disintegrating. But yeah, all that stuff's, I think, really important to me. Just looking at all the context and history and how comedy evolves and changes, and it's just endlessly fascinating.
So what else do you remember from the George Carlin, what little knowledge nugget?
He talked about how in love he was with his wife. I remember that being pretty sweet. And just I think because he was going to pick her up from the airport, or she was picking him up from the airport or something. And it must have been he was picking her up. He's like, well, of course I'm going to pick my wife up at the airport. Like, I love her, and I want to be of service to her in our life. And like, that's disgustingly sweet. And he's like, no, this is what it is. Because he'd also been... this was after the heart issues, and he'd...
The documentary is great. They had a great love story, and he did a ton of cocaine.
Yeah.
And then Kelly tells that story in the documentary where they went to Hawaii and they called it the Summit or something like that. And I guess that's when he made the deal with his wife that he would give up coke.
Yeah.
I guess to save their marriage or whatever, Or
He...
save the family, more accurately.
Like, That's right. Being
I mean,
in love.
like,
What? I don't
yeah.
understand.
Yeah.
Does not compute.
To make sacrifices
Yeah.
for people you love.
Weird.
But yeah, I was talking about how I thought cocaine was the worst for writing jokes. I couldn't imagine how that affects fatherhood.
Yeah.
You know?
I'm trying to think of how he even phrased it. He said he was like clean but not sober, and the difference was like he's still doing weed. and at the time it was still kind of controversial to say that. But now it's like, oh yeah, all parents are like, you know, everybody's dropping gummies and
Yeah, now, geez, weed's everywhere. I remember the 1995 first HBO Aspen Comedy Festival. And at the
Aspen.
Wheeler Opera House, there was a Q&A with George Carlin, and Dana Gould curated. He was the question asker. And he asked him if he ever did drugs to write material. And George Carlin said he never uses drugs or to write material. He always writes the material when he's sober. But after he's written the material, he'll go back, smoke a joint, and it's touch-up time. Or it's punch-up time. That's what he said.
Right.
So that was the thing I always remembered.
it's like the opposite of Hemingway, which is write drunk,
edit sober. Right.
Yeah. But also just the fact that he is blatantly saying he kind of doesn't consider pot drugs.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't even compute in his mind as being part of the process. Of,
Guy was way ahead of the time.
California sober.
Yeah, I know it well. So, and what are the? I can't wait to read this book.
Oh, thanks.
And you got an interview with Joan Rivers, who is one of the. Her work ethic was amazing. Like later in life, where, like a few years before she died, she went and did the Edinburgh Festival.
Yeah.
And she did the full month.
Even like baseline bottom of like what she did for women in comedy is, you know, everything else is gravy.
That's funny. I don't even think in those terms. I just like it's great you point that out. I didn't even think about that because I just think how she influenced me as a comedian and how impressive she was as a writer.
Or just the ballsiness of controlling her career,
the consistency,
what she did and did not want to do, all the image stuff. Apparently she was a bitch at the same time, but like she did all that and made it, you know, like Phyllis, Moms Mabley, there's not a ton of women who you can really put like as the epicenter of that, but she for sure, and was kind of a bitch at the same time.
Okay. I
good and bad. There's good to it too. There's good to it.
I can let her slide more than I can let other people slide.
Yeah.
You know.
This is some labor issues, you know, but
labor issues. What do you mean?
She would do non-union things.
Oh, okay.
But you know, if you look at legacy in life and what it would have taken to survive and, you know, become who she was. Respect.
Truckloads of respect. And you've interviewed Amazing Jonathan, who I loved. And I had Jonathan on this podcast a couple times.
That was a wild one, yeah. His like toes were falling off.
Wow.
Yeah. And everybody, so this was shortly after he'd revealed in, I'm going to say 2015 on WTF with Mark Maron, that his heart was failing, exacerbated by a lot of drug use. And, you know, he's like kind of final curtain call kind of thing. He did a tour, played a couple times at magic places.
He was supposed to die.
And then he stuck
within
around.
a year, and then he stuck around for like 6 or 7 more years.
Yeah. So basically what it was, he was selling everything he owned. He had a lot of cars, a like dozens. A lot of horror memorabilia, props. Like, he'd saved everything.
Yeah.
Even more so.
Yeah.
Not just his comedy career, but
He invited me to go. Apparently he had pinball machines and...
he had two warehouses.
Yeah, full of stuff that he had bought.
Yeah, and so he was selling everything, sold all his cars, and basically operated those couple years on black market stem cells.
Oh, wow. So that's how he survived for them extra years.
Yeah.
And so what, you get injections of that?
I guess so, yeah.
And who's selling them? Where do you get black market stem cells?
I was not privy to those particulars.
Well.
And then there was like the 2 documentaries made about him. I kind of appeared in one for fucking up the plot line a little.
You fucked up the
where
plot
the one documentary crew finds out about the other documentary crew.
Oh, hilarious.
In one of the documentaries. But he hadn't told either of them he was making 2 documentaries. So.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Yeah.
That's so amazing, Jonathan.
So the one director pulls up the news of that the interview that Amazing Jonathan has done with it wasn't Las Vegas Weekly, it was a different Las Vegas paper at the time, where he's talking about making this other documentary. It's the first documentarian's reading it, and my name's like, my story and my name are on the screen, and he's like, "What the fuck?" Ah! And I'm like, "Sorry." Yeah, I have a screenshot somewhere of him like pointing at the screen and yelling at it. So that's my contribution to that.
I love Jonathan. I worked with him a bunch when I was a really young comedian, when I was like a teenager in my early 20s, like in Midwestern gigs, and we stayed in condos together, and like. And he was doing a lot of drugs, and I mean, it was kind of thrilling to hang out with him, you know.
Well, he was like genuinely, like he had that madman mentality, and like all the women and the assistants.
He was
and
it kind of felt like hanging out with like I mean, like a Salvador Dali type. Like, wow, this guy's a genius, and he's way out of control. I mean, I've known. Yeah. I mean, like Hedberg was like that. And there's been a few people I've known in the comedy world. It's like, wow, this who can possibly live like that?
And his house was all like booby trapped with, like, if you flip off the light in the bathroom, this scary picture comes up, or demon kids, and if you walk past this way in the bar, a spider falls on you, and like, it's just his own little personal fun house. And I also remember in that house seeing just a countertop in the bathroom of like drugs, like the prescription.
Right.
He was on a lot of, for the heart stuff and toes falling off, and yeah.
And so You've covered in a lot of, you know, my favorite comedians of all time and people I love personally, like Mark Maron. We don't have to go too much into it because it hasn't been released yet, but you're working on a Mark Maron documentary that I'm in. And
you're in all my stuff. That's weird.
I'm in all your stuff.
Weird.
And this is my way of saying thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mark Maron's fascinating. I, for a while, was just like, stop talking. It's too much and too angry. And but I think around the time he started coming into Vegas and doing that Playboy show that was at the Palms, that Courtney McCown and Paul Hughes ran. I don't know if you did that one. And I think I interviewed him a couple times for that, and kind of realized like, oh no, again, it's just a different perspective. He's on more this alt tip that is more yelly than funny, but he kept evolving.
Yeah.
And after his girlfriend Lynn Shelton died during pandemic, and he started doing these Instagram lives, I definitely saw a new side of him, just in terms of vulnerability and where he even began, the premises that he would talk about on stage eventually, because he's always a writing on stage guy and hard on his sleeve and in the moment. And the things I was seeing was like, oh, this is a man who is embodying right now, turning tragedy into comedy more than anything I've seen recently.
Yeah.
And he's going to go through it, and it's going to be rough, but he's going to come out on the other side. And that's maybe where it's going to even get more interesting. So we've been following around for about 2.5 years from the first time he got back on stage at the Comedy Store, May 7th, 2021.
After things
back on,
opened
yeah,
back up.
the very first night there. And he's like, I don't have no material. I have nothing to say. Let's just see how this goes. And then the process of putting together his HBO special and, you know, the deeper, darker jokes about her death. Now to his dad has dementia, dealing with that. He wants to escape, you know, to Canada to leave, you know, fascism and, you know, racism. And there's a lot more of like life happening for him now. Just had his 60th birthday.
Yeah.
So it's kind of at the point of following him for 2 years. It's been this whole cycle. Who's the man he's going to be now? Who's the comedian he's going to be now? Kind of open-ended. It's like, this is a comedian.
Yeah.
Been through the fires, been through the wars.
The last 2 years for Mark have been really incredible, and seeing how he's dealt with it and how he's grown as a human being. I say it on your documentary. Mark has been really, I mean, because I'm one of the few people who is friends with the guy. And during the pandemic.
Yeah. And an actual friend, and yeah.
I actually, Mark's house and hanging out with him was was the only refuge I had. After my mom and the girl I was dating in 2020, I spent time with them, but I was here with them, and then when they had left, Mark and maybe one other person I would go visit during the pandemic, and just all this incredible time alone. And he's been a really great friend to me. Like, times I've had struggles or a crisis, he's been one of the few people who always comes through for me, to be there for me, you know, as a friend. And what I say in the documentary, he's been really inspiring as just not just a comedian, but a man and a human being, because in the 90s, when I lived in San Francisco and Mark was living there as well, it was such a great comedy scene. Patton Oswalt, Greg Proops, Margaret Cho, all these, we were the young comedians of that,
Yeah.
That era, and playing the game and going to the clubs and hanging out hoping to get the spots and trying to impress each other with writing jokes that were smarter and funnier than each other's. But if you looked back at that group at that time, Mark would have been the last person you thought would have been successful.
Yeah.
Because he was such a sweaty, nervous little drug addict, and he always talked shit about people. He was always angry and bitter. And I think I say this on the documentary, that Mark's one of the few people that I know that I think fame made them a better person. A lot of people crawl up in their own asses, but he's, he's been inspiring, the fact that, he overcame the drugs. He's done everything. He popularized the medium of podcasting. Yeah. Writing books, TV shows, being in movies, all these these things that it is possible to not do drugs, and it is possible to if you look at his life like that, it's been really inspiring. That
or he just now got the HBO special. he's 60 and it's a hard fought uphill battle.
Yeah.
And he's still, I wouldn't say like engaged with the community, but like he gets out there, he puts in the work, he's doing, he's always done kind of residencies around town, like Largo and Dynasty Typewriter, and now he's going to be like at the Elysian and stuff like that. He's been asking about West Side clubs and stuff. So, he wants to still make things, but it's also part of just like him in general. He's still kind of that sweaty, emotional mess in a lot of ways, but he learned how to like channel it.
Well, he got rid of the bitterness and the anger and the talking shit about people. In private, he'll still say something once in a while about somebody, and it'll be the little flashes of the old Mark. But
I can't even tell
he's
you
really
how much.
scrubbed his soul and cleansed himself of impurities.
He is a better person. I will definitely say that unequivocally. But there's a ton of footage we are going to have to erase also.
Oh, really? Of interview stuff?
Of shit talking and, just being a bad... Sometimes the bad behavior still can pop up with comedians.
Yeah.
For him, it's sometimes like ice cream, but also like, oh, what are you talking to that girl for?
Oh, he'll say that to you?
No, like... part of the things that comedians can get in trouble for. He definitely tries to put the brakes on. I'm gonna maybe not provide any details here.
Okay.
But
well, another comedian that you support, and you said you're working on his memoir with him. I think one of the greatest comedians of all time. Also. Is Byron Bowers.
All time.
And it's funny, I remember before Byron even started doing stand-up, he used to always be sitting in the back of the Punchline in Atlanta.
Right.
He would come and watch and study. I don't know, maybe he was doing open mic nights around that time, but I didn't, I just knew he was always there, and he was always really like just quiet and nice and gentle.
Wow.
And we always had like a conversation. I knew he was a guy that wanted to dive in, but and I knew he was studying it, so he'd ask really, really informed questions about stand-up and stuff.
Wow.
And then to see him now, like if I'm on a show with Byron, or if I know I'll go if I'm not working to go watch Byron.
Totally.
That's how much I love him.
Yeah.
And
because it's totally different every single time.
He's not doing like a scripted A to Z set that he does every time. It's always I love the guy's brain. I love
whatever mood he's in.
Yeah.
And he if I'm remembering correctly, he tried once in 2006, quit, tried again in 2007, quit, and then decided to fully jump in 2008. He was also finishing college, and he wanted to get that out of the way. It took him like 10 years. So that was kind of the goal. He was also getting out of a lot of rough family things and friend things around Atlanta, and he moved to LA pretty quickly. So he was serious about it at that time. Also, Sarah Tiana helped him out a lot, and she was also around like in Atlanta. So I guess that would make you like his comedy grandpa, or however that traces
That's the first time I've ever been called a grandpa.
down.
I'll take it. Okay.
Yeah, because there's definitely a lot in the book about her, for sure. So that's
about her helping
wild.
him.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
At the old, oh gosh, what was the name of it? The older place on the west side that then moved to Hollywood, where Comedy Jam started. Everybody hung out there on like Sundays. Oh, what's the name of that show? Black Curtains. I'll figure it out.
And then,
Unknown Theater.
okay, I didn't know that.
The Unknown Theater.
Okay. And then you end the book with a chapter on Brody Stevens, which, God, I love Brody. And I saw him like 2 nights before he killed himself. And I was going through my divorce at the time. And he was so caring and loving to me. And I've known Brody for years. And there were times where he, he obviously he had dealt with a lot of mental health stuff. And he had past crises. And there were times that I was worried about him. But 2 days before he killed himself, I was not worried about him. He seemed like he was perfectly fine. And he was so sweet and caring with me. He was like, hey, man, I heard you're getting divorced. And I know you're having a hard time right now. And I just wanted to say, hey, I feel for you and I care about you. And like, it really meant a lot to me that he was saying, we were, in that sacred ground area behind the Comedy Store.
Yes.
And we had this
Smoking alley.
Really wonderful conversation where he was concerned about my well-being. And then it was such a shock. I remember Joey Diaz called me. And the first thing he said was, see why we got to look out for each other? See why we got to call each other all the time and see how the other person's doing? And I was like, what happened? And then he told me about Brody.
Yeah.
And then I've thought about it. And those moments when I was talking to him, I detected nothing. Like, why didn't I see? Why? I'm sure whenever anybody kills himself, everybody who knew them thinks about that. Like, why didn't I detect anything in his eyes or what he was saying?
I also did. I wrote about Brody when he was alive, obviously. A couple different festivals and places, and God, I hung out with them in New York, Boston, Grand Rapids, Michigan, Vegas, here all the time. And like just so universally beloved everywhere. And he made everyone feel like a part of this comedy community that he really wanted there to be. And doing the SiriusXM program that I did on him as well. And I had a lot of people talking about him. Jeff Ross, his best friend Tana Manu from Seattle, Josh Wolf, also from Seattle. They were both talking about all them running around with Joey Diaz up there. A lot of the thought with Brody's final days was, I guess, certainly not to the extent of Hedberg, but he kind of also had it planned and knew what he was doing, and so it was probably on purpose to leave people with a good memory and friendship. And
well,
yeah, there's people who have stories of like, he called me up and was like, I'll be in town, so we'll hang out. It'll be like the old days, and I'll get you up on stage, and
like you're bleeding up
as a way of saying goodbye.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, and
Yeah.
One great thing about Comedy Central that they made that show with him, and I remember when that was made because he had this mental health crisis before then. Mm-hmm. That he had overcome. He had a couple little, I don't know what you would call it, incidents, breakdowns.
Yeah. Well, he's on different medications since like '92.
Yeah.
So and a lot of going on and off.
And I thought it was one of the coolest things Comedy Central ever did was putting him on, and it was a great show because he was himself. He's unleashed and just the ball of energy and love and comedy that he was, and the dorky, silly jokes,
Yeah, because it was always the kind of between moments where he's shown of the kind of the indignant, like, he wanted to be successful as a comic, but then if people weren't liking him, he would be kind of funnier, being mad at them, and he knew that, so he could work on that level too.
Yeah.
Just all sorts of like very specific Brodyisms about positive energy and the push and believe and all that stuff. Like you kind of understand after a while that it was more like talking to himself.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, that show was just pretty fascinating for, again, like looking at a unique comedian mentality. His story was fascinating. It's kind of difficult to see more projects in the works because he was so able to divide, you know? A lot of people were mystified by his special that was on Amazon from the main room of the store. But to the people like within comedy and hardcore comedy fans who got it, yeah, just no one like him, professionally or personally. You know, I think it's the title of my XM special, the series was Positive Connections, which I think is more his legacy of like, we need to be connected as people who love comedy.
Oh, Hummingbird just came.
Oh, Brody.
Stuck his head. I think it's Brody. He's 818 for life.
Till I die.
Till I die. Well, Julie, it's been wonderful to coffee and chat with you. And I wore the Skank Fest shirt. That was one of the funnest.
That was so fun.
One of the funnest comedy festivals I've ever been a part of. What a great thing for Las Vegas. And I like. Anyway, it was brilliant.
It was my first time.
Me too.
Yeah, so this was the 7th year, second time they did it in Vegas. And this is, you know, basically the Legion of Skanks podcast and all their Rebecca Trent, Out of the Creek in the Cave,
Love
and Christine
Rebecca
Evans
Trent.
of The Stand. Yeah, like I've been kind of fascinated with her for years. Of just, again, another ballsy woman doing her thing in comedy, man.
Yeah, God bless her.
Yeah.
Independently.
Not afraid to, you know, make things her own, DIY, Christine. But the whole thing with the festival, I covered it for the LA Times and was kind of worried about going and thinking like, I'm going to have to wear pants and watch my drinks. And it was the most fun. The audiences were
huge comedy
so
fans.
hardcore comedy fans. But it was also a festival gathering at the same time for like the purpose of comedy. It's not about making deals and fake panels and all the bullshit like awards, and it was just like you have 6 different comedy options right now. Yeah. And if you miss somebody, you're gonna see them again some other time. Like you did probably, how many shows did you do?
God, I did like
it was like 6 at least.
3 days. I think I did. Let's see, 3, 2. So yeah, I did what, 8 sets. In 3 days.
The LA Raiders showcases, and then like the Legends, which
great.
was another like.
Yeah, and I like that because everything was all like 6 stages where the venues were all right next to each other on the top floor of that, you know.
Neonopolis.
Whatever it's called. And Neon, is that what it's called?
Neonopolis, yes.
And then all the fans were there. So you couldn't
circle,
you couldn't, and it's in a round building top, and you couldn't help but interact with the comedy fans and comedians. And when I wasn't doing sets, it was like when I did Edinburgh. When I wasn't doing sets, I was watching.
Yeah, what else was happening?
I was like, I couldn't get enough. It was great. It was like...
and they were like, I didn't know anything about the fighting stuff, but there's like a ring outside and people are boxing and karateing and there's so many different things and different levels of, from like the biggest headliners to...
There's this young female comedian, I don't know her last name, her first name is Miranda.
From the store?
From the store.
Meadows.
Miranda Meadows, thank you.
Yeah.
She's so brilliant and so hilarious. If a male comedian would have done this, I would have found it disgusting. But she was fighting some guy in the ring. Like, did you see that? Mm-hmm. And she's playing with him. They had like numchucks with
they're like the Nerf,
with like Nerf styrofoam around it. And then, but then they could also like MMA box or whatever. she body slams this guy, and then she runs around the ring
Yeah.
doing the fucking pussy licking
Was she?
gesture. And then when the announcer comes in the center of the ring to announce that, she goes, "Give me the mic," and she goes, "Fuck bitches, get money." And she showed me the video the other night at the Comedy Store. Oh my God. Like I said, if a man would have done it, I would have been like, oh,
Yeah.
what a fucking sleazy pig. But her doing it as this badass woman, female comedian, it was hilarious.
Well, that's part of the whole comedy vibe of we're not bad people. We're not, alt-right comedians. We're just pushing things because it's stupid and ridiculous and absurd. And it's like that. Exactly. Like, why is that freaking funny? Because it wouldn't be appropriate. Like, it's just about pushing it to that next, who knows, like the Joe DeRosa thing of being on the Legions of Skanks podcast and disappearing behind the stage with a trans woman and going out to prove something and coming back out, and this is the show, and embracing something about himself and putting it out there. Because, what?
I didn't see that.
That was the very first thing that happened on Friday noon, I think. But yeah, it was so much fun. It took forever to recover. But I think it did kind of spark something with me of like, we're just trying to laugh.
Yeah.
We don't need
so how do you think
divisions in comedy, and it's subjective. If you don't like it, who cares?
Yeah.
Find something else.
How do you find the state of comedy? Are we okay, or is it gonna?
Right. Jeez.
Will we still be able to make jokes?
I would say, as a whole, I mean, comedy is obvious in a digital boom. So that side of it where artists are able to connect directly with fans and make their own thing, and you don't necessarily need all the gatekeepers. That part's amazing. I mean, we're doing the podcast here.
Yeah.
But just the idea that there's longer, like, career paths. There's a lot up in the air, though, of you do have to stay with the social media and what's coming next and what's the hottest, and is there time to let artists marinate and be who they want to be on stage without those added pressures. So I think it's just the same as anything. Everything's going to keep changing. Evolve or die.
Evolve or die.
Live and let live.
Yeah.
Laugh if you can.
Yeah.
Smoke cigarettes.
They're delicious. Julie, I love you as a person. I love you what you've done in your career. Congratulations on your tight 20, the book and the 20. Excuse me.
Let's take that one
Cigarettes
again.
are delicious as he coughs.
Let's take that one again. As I spilled coffee.
Congratulations on your 20 years.
Thank you.
As a comedy journalist and lover of the genre. And thanks for being my friend for all these years.
I was gonna say, like, there's some comedians who I have considered friends over the years, and you're definitely one of them. I think we have a similar vibe and no nonsense attitude.
I think our tastes in comedy are really similar. We really love, and that's why I can't wait to read your book. Amazon.com.
Thank you so much.
Tight 20.
I'm glad we finally did this. Yeah, it was a long time coming. So
yeah, and next time we'll just hang out in coffee like we normally do. In closing, do you have any words of advice or any wisdom or words of advice for the people of the earth?
Go with your gut. I think it's much more vital tool when you learn how to read it than people think. Don't listen to the industry. Don't listen to reps. Go with the gut. Go with what you think is funny. But you're also going to have to put in the hard work for it too. So be prepared. It has to be something that, I only do this because I have to. You probably only do comedy because you have to.
It's my oxygen.
There's nothing else.
I couldn't live without it.
And that's the key to all of it, I think. Do what you have to do.
Yeah.
Big and small, all those aspects. The answers are there. You just have to know what you're doing.
Hooray
Listen
for
to it.
humanity. Well, Julie Seabaugh, long may you run, my friend. Long may you run. And
Thank
as
you.
I turn off the camera, would you like to say Miranda Meadows' advice?
Oh, Miranda Meadows, when you beat somebody up, fuck bitches, get money.
That's it.
Fuck bitches, get money.
You're the best. Hooray, Julie. Thanks for being my friend.